Okay. Well, I can go ahead and kick us off and um as others come in, we definitely, this can be interactive. Pause, ask any questions, please. I'm Brittany Davis with Lucid for Education with our K-12 Learning Solutions team. And we are actually invited this panel of coaches who you'll meet here. We're excited to have them introduce themselves to, just as we go back to school, may have started already, may not have in this season, to start kind of an organic conversation around what are some of the best practices coaches are using, share out ideas of what we're seeing kind of across the country, or some other ideas. Just get us all like talking and feeling inspired as we're going back to school. So without further ado, if you don't mind, we'll have you introduce yourselves before we jump into some of those questions we've surfaced, and please bring up any questions you have. Laura Lee, do you mind kicking it off for us?
Yeah, sure. So you just want me to introduce myself?
That would be great. Thanks.
Great. So my name is Laura Lee Ward, and I work for Alpine School District. And this is my 5th year of being an innovative learning coach. That's what we call it in this district. And prior to that, I was a dual immersion 6th grade teacher. So I taught the English side, and I also taught the Spanish side at a different time.
Awesome. Thank you. And then over to Jeff.
Yeah, so my name is Jeff Mortensen. I'm innovative learning coach with Alpine School District. I work on Laura Lee's team alongside her. I've taught 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, and I've been coaching now. How long again, Laura Lee?
This is our 5th year.
Our 5th year of being innovative learning coaches. So yeah, definitely love ed tech and love seeing the amazing things teachers can do when they have these resources and they have the support that they need for these resources.
Awesome. Thanks. Katie.
Hi. I look nothing like that picture that I gave you guys. I was like, that looks a little bit like a witch, but that's okay. Anyway, hi, I'm Katie Jones. I am in my 17th year of education. I was an innovative learning coach with Laura Lee and Jeff for 3 years. And now I'm going back into the classroom. And yeah, I'm just excited to be here.
Thank you. And then Vanessa.
Hey, I'm Vanessa Cicero. I am currently just joined the Lucid for Education team helping districts. And prior to that, I was an ed tech specialist with the Canyons district here in Utah for 7 years. And then for 7 years prior to that, I taught elementary. And I've got Jeff beat. I taught 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. So I did everything except kindergarten and 5th. They were too little or too, ready for middle school. So I'm excited to talk with everyone today.
Thank you. Okay, so we do have some questions we'll start with, and these are just your ideas about the coaching role and thoughts, suggestions. So we'll dive into those, but please bring up or surface any others that we may want to talk about wherever this conversation leads. So first question, if you don't mind, what are some of the best practices or ideas you've seen in your experience as a coach that you might share with others?
I will just, to start off anything, I think understanding the importance of relationships in coaching. I'd say before you can really get into any real meaningful coaching, you need to have relationships built with the people that you're coaching, because coaching and coming into someone's classroom and talking to them about what they're doing and things that they could do to step up their game or improve or help them grow in ways that they'd like to. That's pretty personal. You have to be, they have to know they can trust you to do that. So before anything else, you have to have relationships established.
Jeff, how did you establish those relationships?
It's a hard thing to do. The way our district has things set up with innovative learning coaches is we, in the elementary level, at least we are assigned to about most of us are assigned to 3 elementary schools. So we're spread a little bit thin. So it can be hard to feel like you're giving the time and attention that you would want as a teacher from a coach. But I think we do the best we can. Some of the things that I've done to help build those relationships is making sure I'm making my way into every classroom to introduce myself, tell them, my story, help them understand that I'm someone who is a teacher as well, and then be willing to help with just about anything. Help them understand that you're not there to evaluate, you're not there as admin, you're there strictly to support them in the goals that they set, and you can help them establish a understanding of what their current reality is, help them see things from a different perspective, give them the tools they need. But being willing to help with anything, whether that's, if you got to step out for a minute, I'm happy to come in here and help with your class. Or, there's this really cool tool, Lucid is awesome. Do you want to know how to use it? I'll come in and I'll even model how you could start a lesson with your kids, and just being, it's oftentimes stepping out of your own comfort zone. And I think teachers are receptive to that. They can tell when you're genuine in what you're doing. So having it, I think you have to have the right mindset of, I'm there to support them. I'm on their level. There's no coach teacher thing. If the whole environment's really sensitive to that, I don't think you can be successful if you in building those relationships if you see yourself as anything above a teacher, which I don't know why you would even want to, because that's one of the coolest jobs to have. So
awesome. Thanks. Any other thoughts?
I have something going off of building relationships. And this is actually something I wasn't able to do because I also had 4 schools that I was going into, so I didn't really have a permanent location. But a lot of our instructional coaches who worked in one building, they said one of the best things they had was super simple. They had a jar of candy in their office that they just let anybody come in. Like if you ever just needed a snack, you could come in, just grab it, no questions asked, just to have a pick me up. And they said that really helped. So many people would just pop in, grab candy, then they start a quick conversation while they popped in, and they just were getting that face-to-face time. So they said that was one of the most powerful and easy things that they've done, just to kind of really get that face time and start those conversations and build those relationships to make it, then when you pop into their classroom, they're like, oh yeah, the candy girl. So they feel much, lowers that stress level when they come in.
I feel like, Katie, you did a lot of, I think you had some really good ways of establishing those relationships. I can't remember what specifically, but I just know that you're someone who does a really good job with building those relationships with the people that you are working with. Laura Lee as well. Very personable people. I would love to hear what maybe some of the things you guys have done, if you can think of any. I know we're just coming off summer break here, so it's hard to remember.
Go ahead, Laura Lee.
Oh, thanks. So I think, and this is going to sound maybe a little too formal or whatever, but I think besides, there's a couple of thoughts that I have. One, I try not to take myself too seriously. And I think that depending on your, even as it can be very intimidating as a new coach, or being a coach in a new school, even if you've been a coach before, it can be intimidating and you want to come across competent. And so it can be the times when I've been it's okay that I don't know everything. My strength isn't knowing everything. My strength is eventually figuring out the answers, or my strength is empowering people to help them figure it out. When we can shift that, I think that a book I've been reading lately that I really can connect with is The Advice Trap. And he kind of talks about resisting the urge to be the for your advice monster. And so to do that, I think that I can connect with that, in that it's not about me knowing the answers and me having all of the control. Instead, I try to give choice and voice, making sure that the teacher can do those, which are, that's nothing new. But I think that like recognizing that I'm not like this robot here to save them, helps me to like, whenever I can do that and like allow some humor and just be like recognizing of their problem, but try to like be human about it. I don't know, that's helped me. That's probably not that great of an answer, but
that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
I think it's great. That's so Brittany had come to me asking about if I knew some coaches, and Lauralee and Jeff were the first to come to mind because of their ability to build relationships. And I appreciate Jeff saying I'm good at it. And part of that's my personality. And that can be, I never want people to think like, oh, I don't have the right personality to be a coach. Because that's not just because that's just me. I'm an open book and ta-da, I'm here. But that's not what everybody needs or wants. So whatever you are is be who you are. But I will say a few things that really helped me get to know people was first, respond as quickly as possible. These teachers are reaching out to you and you are their customer service. That's like, think of yourself as a customer service in a customer service role, and you want them to be happy and you want them to be comfortable and you want them to leave liking what you did. And not because your job depends on it or anything like that, but you want them to trust you. It goes back to that idea of trust that Jeff mentioned. But if I answered immediately, even if I didn't know the answer, I just said, hey, I'm going to look into this right now. Let me check with my team. We all started as innovative learning coaches together in Alpine District. They didn't have any, and we all started together. And I will not tell you how many messages were flying back and forth from our team during those I would say that first year. It was they were my lifeline. So use your team. Use Google. I was joking about it earlier, but google.com is your best friend. Find those answers for those teachers, but also just let them know you're there. Because that in the end of the year, when I would get my little, like people would say, thank you. They'd say, thank you so much for just always being available. And that's, I want to be careful with that too, because we've become a part of this culture of be available all the time. You need to be there, but letting them know that you are going to try and help and you're going to take care of that. That was a huge part of building relationships for me.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, Vanessa, please.
I was just going to reiterate what Katie said about, don't feel, especially if you're new coming into it. Like I did this with teaching too. Like I thought I had to be the best. I had to answer everything, but your team is there. In the world of, technology and instructional best practices, you don't know everything. And so like, we also had like our equivalent to a Slack where all of our ed techs were on a group message. We were always going back and forth, and just don't feel like you're not, awesome if you have to reach out for help. And then once you start reaching out, then they, your teammates feel comfortable reaching out, and, everyone then is in that environment of we can all help each other and raise each other up and all that kind of stuff.
And along that, what you said a second ago, normalizing and being okay with saying to a teacher who asks you a question, I don't know, but let me go find out for you. Because that's the other part of the role that I see for coaches is these teachers don't have time to dig into every single one of our ed tech resources to become experts and to know how it's going to be implemented best in their classroom, or to even, just find the answers to some of their questions. They don't have time to do that. So for me to be able to take that off their plate and say, I don't know, first of all, I don't know the answer, and it's okay. I'm not feeling bad or like I'm inadequate because I don't know the answer to the question you just asked, but I'm going to go find out for you. Like maybe it's a how to log in with this, or how do I implement this program the right way so that it doesn't violate student data privacy, or just really anything. Being willing to say, I don't know, but let me find out, and then making sure you actually follow through. I have to write everything down, otherwise I forget.
And then, so I love this idea of like, okay, how do you start building the relationship? That will be so important at the beginning of school too. As you then take that, or like when you are working with educators, then what are some of the best practices you've found for actually like implementing coaching?
Who wants to go first?
I can.
Yeah, go.
So we seem to focus on different kind of research models. We've kind of looked at different ones as a team, and we've looked at Jim Knight, we've looked at Diane Sweeney, we've looked at a couple other, and Jim Knight and Diane Sweeney are two that we've maybe more heavily focused on at how they kind of address coaching. At the end of the day, like there's different types of coaching that might be necessary, right? So there's like the kind of coaching where, like you're partnering together to come up with something new. There's kind of more like, oh, here, I know how to use this tool. Let me kind of show you. There's different needs. But when it comes to coaching, I feel like, you might, as a coach, when you learn about these different ones, you might tend to kind of go one way. I really like the Jim Knight stuff myself. And so I might, have an idea of like, hey, let's see if we can, figure out our current reality and then kind of come up with a goal from there. Sometimes a teacher will already have a goal. And so there's different goals, there's different types of goals. At the end of the day, I think that coaching can be really effective when we have goals. I think goals play an important role. We don't like to, I don't think, at least I know, I try to be very aware of what my teachers' workloads are, where they're at, and I don't want to overwhelm them. And so sometimes more informal coaching, like a mix of more formal and more informal coaching is kind of how I kind of work. I don't know, other thoughts from other people?
Yeah, for me, we've spent time in our district really focusing and learning from Jim Knight and Diane Sweeney. And whenever we do that, we're in a setting where we have our instructional coaches there as well. So our district has instructional coaches, now called PLC coaches. But as an innovative learning coach, the challenge was figuring out how those coaching models fit with what I do. And I found that they don't fit just as well as you would hope they would, given especially the workload and how much we cover in our job. So to be able to do like full coaching cycles, there was a time where I was like feeling down on myself, like I wasn't doing a good job because I wasn't doing these coaching cycles as they are written in these books and presented to us, but realizing that that's just not really possible with what I do, with what's expected of me. So kind of changing the idea of implementing just as much as I can from those coaching cycles, or kind of taking them as a shell and filling in how I can best fit those. Other things that I've done is doing like a monthly newsletter. Our team has kind of started this thing. It's a lot of our schools around here where we call it Learning in the Lou. And a lot of them we actually do on Lucid. We create the publication. It's just a newsletter that we tape up in the teacher bathroom stalls, because we know they have a break there. They're going to read something. So we'll do little tech tips on there, or little bits of information like a newsletter to help just kind of remind teachers that we're there to help them. So the tech tips has been helpful, and then answering any question that we've heard, like we talked about, and then communicating, establishing a weekly meeting if you can with your school administration, so that you can be aware of what's going on and they can see you as a resource. It's really easy to just get caught up in like coming to the school and working with those teachers. But unless you're telling your story of what you're doing, oftentimes administration can be a little bit unaware of what's happening. And so to help support you in your role, they need to know a little bit of what's going on, while keeping that confidentiality with teachers of what they're working on, so they don't feel like you're just reporting back to the admin of what each teacher's going through. But if you can get admin to support you and to basically endorse what you're doing, to me, that's the best strategy of all. I've worked at schools where that doesn't necessarily happen, and schools where coaching is seen by the administration as a great resource. And so that can only be done if you're putting yourself out there and you're working with the administration, making sure that they're aware of what you're capable of and what you're willing to help with.
Fantastic. I don't know if you had thoughts, Katie or Vanessa, as well about that. Okay, I know Vanessa, if you don't mind, that did spark some thoughts for me, Jeff, but I know Vanessa had a thought about what you're saying, kind of about those tips and tricks. So I don't know if you want to share that, Vanessa.
Oh yeah. So this is something that was the most effective thing I've ever done. Not so much with coaching, but just like response from teachers. Like I could actually tell they were reading. It was similar to the newsletter, except it was just a weekly email that literally had like either a 30-second video or a one sentence line of just like the only thing in there was the tips and tricks. So like on a technical side, it was like Command Z. How amazing. I had never heard about that before, and nobody else had either. Like I always got at least 5 or 6 people at each of my schools to like write back and say, oh my gosh, game changer, love it. And then like kind of came back to that like relationships where I'm building capacity very like in small little chunks while also building relationships with them. And so even though it's just something so small, that was the most impactful thing I've ever done. And I stole it from someone else, so I can't take credit.
Can I add something about that, the weekly tips? I think that one of the cool things about that is that it gives you an opportunity to touch base every week with everyone, even though it's not like some super personal way. I felt like there are some teachers that I have that are really on top of it and like they check those tips every week. And even if I'm not meeting with them like in person and they're not going through a formal or informal coaching experience, they will reach out to me and then I'll be able to like talk to them a little bit. And so I felt like there were some differentiation opportunities because like the tips that we would give would be, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's like maybe it's not applicable. Maybe differentiation is the wrong word, but it's just like different tips like affect different people at different times. And so they appreciate them in different ways. And you don't have to, like, as a coach, you don't have to put in all that work each week. Because I mean, it might take an hour or something to make that every week. But like, if you work with your team, then you can like kind of take turns with the tips and things like that.
Really good points. That's awesome. I love that. Oh, Jeff, please.
Oh, no, I had nothing.
Okay. No, I love that the idea that you guys were talking about, but just like meeting different needs of different teachers and starting with maybe these like recommended practices, but then finding the actual needs of the teachers and adjusting to those. We will move on to our next question then. So this is now, oh yes, this is it. What questions might coaches have as they're going into maybe this role for the first time or back to school? What questions did you guys all see come up for yourselves as well?
My big question was, what's my job? It was huge, just trying to define my role. And it really just depends on your district and your school and all of those things, but it takes time. So be patient, be so patient with yourself as you're starting this out. And if you've been a coach for a while, you embrace those little victories. The one teacher that wants to meet with you that week to talk about something, you're like, okay, best day ever. And that will grow and it will start to just become more natural. But in the beginning, it was, okay, what's my job and how do I do it effectively? But I mean, it's just so much of it is just finding your footing and one day at a time. Oh my goodness, one day at a time. But again, hopefully you have a team like I did that made it possible for me to make it through that. And I don't mean to sound negative there. It was hard, but it was so good. But I was so grateful for the people that were in the trenches with me. So I don't know if that's helpful at all, but there you go.
I think.
Oh, please, Jen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just going to say, to go off what you just said, Katie, establishing, relationships with your team, making sure that you are there to support them so that they feel like they can, that it's reciprocated back. And then also just, go easy on yourself, because each school, I mean, assuming that these coaches or people are working in more than one school, or they're just in a new school, or maybe they have a new administration or a new faculty. It seems like, from my experience, each school has a different idea of how I can be helpful there. Different administration will, ask me to help in different ways. And so I see that my job is like, my 3 schools are like a Venn diagram, right? And there's the commonalities of what I do at all 3 schools, but then there's different things that I do at each school that I don't do at other places. And so just kind of understanding that it's okay to, I would say, don't compare yourself to another coach. For one, they have strengths that you don't have, and you have strengths that they don't have. So that's where that team effort really comes into play, especially with a role like this, where you're supporting, a whole school, if not more than one whole school, and you add all those teachers up. I mean, it's like, for me, it's like 90 to 100 teachers that are looking to me as a support person. And so knowing that, like, I'm not going to have the answers to everything, but I know I have teammates that are getting similar questions from other schools, from their schools and their teachers, and just communicating and putting your guard down and being willing to learn and listen. And don't think too highly of yourself. You're there to help other people, and you have knowledge to share. So don't downplay what you have to offer, but also be open to learning, because really, as coaches, we're asking our teachers to be vulnerable with you. We're asking teachers to be willing to try new ideas, and to be okay with admitting they don't know everything. And so why wouldn't we do the same? And then also, just go easy on yourself, because it's really easy to get caught up and be afraid that you're not doing it good enough. We're teachers teachers put their whole heart and soul into what they're doing often. And you got to go easy on yourself to be able to feel like you're making a difference, right?
Along those lines, with that concept of the role and figuring it out, and our self-talk about that, and the question we hear a lot is, how do you manage your time then in the role too, when it can be so large and nebulous?
I can say something about that. I think that when I first switched from being a teacher to a coach, it's pretty weird, because you're going from, like, literally every second of your day is completely scheduled out with your students, to now all of a sudden, if you have multiple schools, you're like, well, which school do I go to when? How long do I stay at a school? Like, what do I do when I'm at the school? Like, things like that, especially when you're just getting started. And so I think for me, figuring out, like, I started with, like, because at the time I've kind of gone between 3 or 4 schools. And so I've played with different things that work. Like, you don't have to have the right answer right away. Like, for what does your schedule look like? And I think that, like, sometimes if we start a certain way, we think that that's just the way it has to be. But I remember I was in a Diane Sweeney conference, like the January before COVID. So January 2020. And, like, I didn't totally get to hash it out because things kind of went crazy, right? But I remember her talking about, like, basing, like, having the flexibility of, like, maybe a certain chunk of time, you're spending more time at one school for like 6 weeks or whatever. And then maybe you switch it, and then you're spending more time at a different school for 6 weeks. And just kind of, like, depending on what the school's needs are, that's just kind of a scheduling thing. In general, I do half days at each of my schools so that they can feel like I'm there a lot. Even if at the end of the day, it only adds up to 1.5 days a week, they see me there 2 or 3 times a week. And so then they feel like I'm able to, like, work on relationships, and they can feel like I'm there to support them more. So that's kind of how I structure that. But I mean, it's been a work in progress. And I think that once you have like that structure in place at the beginning, besides like, helping teachers like figure out why half the kids' logins aren't working on whatever, right? You might be like, all right, well, now what, right? Like I think something that kind of helped me, some years I maybe do it more than others, based on like what the needs are of the school, what things are looking like. But sometimes I might even send out a survey. I'll send out a beginner survey the very beginning of the year about like stresses and excitements for the year, what people are like, very quick survey. Like I don't want to take a lot of time. And then once I learn about their stresses, then I can kind of help them with that. I also might send out a survey a couple weeks in, like, hey, I want to hear about some of the goals that you have this year so I can help support you. It's an optional thing. And I've had teachers sign up, especially when I was a new coach. I did that, I think, more. Like I would send out this like optional sign up thing, and then people could sign up during their breaks or whatever. And then that would kind of get me going on knowing where to start in terms of how to use my time. Like, I don't know, maybe that's just kind of a side thing.
That's perfect. Thank you. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, kind of going off of like scheduling there, like you said at the end, a lot of times it kind of goes back to like building relationships, and then just kind of also modeling by hoping that they, like then we'll just absorb it as well. I found it like really easy for me to like send out similarly like a sign up for like, hey, I'm going to do model lessons on this activity here, like here are all my available times, sign up. And then a lot of times I would, that was a faster way for me to like, instead of reaching out to each individual person, I could, pull a full blast out. And then as they see other people signing up, then they want to sign up. And then after you've been vulnerable and modeled in their classroom, now they're feeling open, and builds that relationship while also they, got to learn something by observing the model lesson. And then along with that, I use the Google Calendar scheduler, but I found that to be super helpful. Just they always had my Google Calendar schedule. So if they had a question, wanted a meeting, they wanted me to come into their classroom, they would just hop on there and then add time to my schedule, which made it so much easier than like emailing back and forth. So they always knew, oh, she's coming on Tuesday. I'm quickly going to get on her calendar. So then that way I can just ask her right in person. So that really kind of helped with that whole like managing hundreds of teachers and getting face-to-face with them.
Awesome. Okay. And then one other question we had submitted: how do you identify goals with teachers?
I'll jump on that a little bit. The goals need to be set. It needs to be a goal that the teacher that's important to the teacher. I mean, you can't set a goal for somebody else. So, that can be done through, observing what a teacher is doing, or recording and watching and recording with them of them teaching, and just kind of having guiding questions to get to a different an area where a goal could be set. And doing a lot of listening. When the teacher's talking, you're doing a lot of listening and parroting back really what you're hearing, and the classic, what I'm hearing is you're saying this, and wording it in a way that could say, does that sound like something we want to work on? Is that something that I can support you in getting in becoming stronger at, or whatever? And you can create goals that way. But really, you can have administrators that can say like, this teacher scored this low on this in their evaluation. I want you to go work with them on that. And that's really challenging. So I really avoid those kind of goals as much as I can. I'll approach a teacher, and just say, I'd love to spend some time in your room. Are there things that you feel like you'd like to get better at, or what can I offer? Or, let's do a little recording and you just watch it. I'm not going to watch your recording. I want you to watch it and get some ideas, similar to what like Diane Sweeney will do. Or is that Jim Knight? I can't remember who does the video recordings.
Jim Knight's more the video, but
yeah,
I'm sure they both do.
it's just the reality stuff. Yeah. But really, when it comes to setting goals for teachers, it has to be their own goal, and you're supporting them in the growth. And the truth is, they might set goals that you're like, I don't think this is the number one priority you should be worrying about right now, but that's not my place. My place is to support them in any way that I can. And when it comes to goals specifically, you can't set a goal for someone else and expect them to buy into it.
Mm-hmm.
I know that doesn't necessarily answer the question of like, how do you establish those goals? That's probably how you don't establish goals. So,
also needed. Yeah. Anything else you guys wanted to say about that? Okay.
Sorry. No, I just was going to say, I think what Jeff was saying is being in the classroom. If you're looking for that first step of how to set a goal, either, and Laura Lee mentioned this, like do a co-teaching lesson with the teacher and then sit down and ask them after, how'd that feel? What'd you like? What'd you not like what's going on? And that way, that might be a good way to get into setting a goal. And teachers usually have an idea. They really they want to do it. And so if you open that conversation, they will know what they want.
And if I could just add one thing to that, and that's when you said getting into classrooms, it made me remember, that's where I think having the admin support is really important, because if they can establish the expectation with the faculty that it's normal for a coach to come into your room and spend time watching you teach, spend time teaching with you, if they can establish that that's an expectation, then you don't feel like you are intruding or like, playing by your own rules at the school. It normalizes it. And yeah, that's so important. If you can get your administration to set expectations that help support what you're doing, with the understanding that it is, there's a confidentiality there with teachers and coaches. It's not a report back to the administration. It's not evaluation type observations. But if you can get administration to support and to endorse you coming into classrooms, that's really going to be helpful. And then you can go in and start helping teachers set goals.
Really good point too on that differentiation. This is not an observation evaluation, I should say. Okay, connecting to something else you're saying, this interesting question here. What not to do? Have you guys discovered anything? And I think you were kind of helping us do that, Jeff, in your last comment, but are there things that through trial and error we've learned like, I would change that in the future? Because sometimes that's really helpful too to learn from.
I'll just say one thing that was hard for me not to do, I'll say this.
Okay, yeah.
Was let the teacher drive. When it comes to showing them how to do something, or like click here, actually just let me do it, like hand me your stinking mouse, I can do this really fast. That was hard for me as a coach to let go and let them drive and let them do it at their own pace. So that's something.
That's a really good point. That takes longer. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
And mine was kind of like, make sure that you don't have no boundaries. So like a lot of times as a coach, like relationships are important. You want to develop those, but then, you can have teachers who like, they're asking so much of you, like you almost become like their psychologist or their therapist because they're coming in and talking to you. So, like think about, constructive ways that you can set boundaries. And also like same thing, you want to have relationships with your admin and you want to like have buy-in and all that stuff. But you also, at least what I found a lot is like the admins are so overworked. They have so much they need to do that they'll start to like push off some like administrative tasks to you, which is fine, but also make sure you like set your boundaries. Otherwise you're just, now your job is doing a bunch of other things that, isn't your actual job. So, even though we want relationships, we also need to set boundaries. Yeah. And I was terrible at that.
And with the admin stuff, I found it's really important not to come across as admin. Don't do whatever you can to keep yourself from being seen as administration. I don't have my admin certificate. I mean, I don't have any desire to even get my admin certificate. But it's really hard for teachers to feel like they can turn to you as a safe place if they think that you are if you're any type of administration. It changes where you are in their eyes of like, a safe place. That it can make you look like you're above them somehow, and you just can't be a safe place if someone sees you as anybody who teachers are. We get a lot of anxiety about those evaluations because we pour our heart into the work, and so to be told that it's not good enough, it's like being told that you're not good enough. And so if you just whatever you can do not cross the line into administration. When I first started coaching, my office was right next to the principal's office at one of my schools, and people would walk through, and I started getting the vibe that they thought I was admin, or that they were starting to see me in some kind of administrative capacity, and I think it affected things. So I moved my office into the library, and the setting was more conducive to being a coach. So I don't be an admin unless you are an admin.
I have one too. I think that all of us have had this experience where, we start talking to a teacher and we're like, oh, this is what you need to do. This, and that's not your problem. And I think that half the time we're not even solving the right problem. And so I think that it's really important. So my advice not to do would be, don't just try to like go in and save everyone and solve everyone's problems. Like your role is to like help them solve their problem, and they still maintain responsibility for it. And they're the teacher, they're the expert of their classroom, and respecting that, I think is really important. And so rather than just hearing the first second of what they say and then trying to jump in and prove your importance or solve the fast problem or whatever, right? I think that more important than that would be to make sure that we're understanding the problem correctly, or the situation, and asking, like Jeff mentioned earlier. So if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, this is what you're saying. Is that what it sounds like? And what else is there besides that problem? And what else is the problem? And maybe, slowing down, maybe staying curious longer in the conversation rather than jumping to just finding a solution really fast.
I like that. Stay curious longer. That's great.
Yeah.
That is such a temptation. Like for me in my past, I feel like, and learning to ask those like follow-up questions to keep saying like, why, or tell me more about that. Okay. That's really powerful. Second to last question, maybe for our new coaches out there, what do you anticipate as worries or concerns that we could talk about? And what do you anticipate as things that to look forward to at the beginning of this role?
I think Katie touched on this when she talked earlier about not knowing her role, or trying to figure out what my job is. And that's, as a new coach, that can, whether you're on a brand new team, like the whole team is new, like it was for us, or you're joining a team that's, that has a history and has been around a while. When we have new coaches join our team, they are really intimidated. I've learned that they create little separate chats with the new coaches, and they ask each other the questions. And I say, it's okay. Like, don't feel, there's no bad questions. Like, we all just give anything we can to each other here to help each other. And I ask questions all the time about stuff that I should know right now, or that I knew 2 years ago, but haven't had to do anything with it until now. And so, don't feel bad about being new. Don't feel bad about not knowing things, because all of us, we've been in, even if you're on a team with experienced coaches, we still don't feel like we know anything. There's plenty of times a day where it's like, oh man, I should know that. Laura Lee, can you remind me, how do I do this? Or this teacher's asking this question. Anybody have an idea? And oftentimes, if you're using things like Slack or Google Chats, where you can search through the archives, go look it up as well. And if it's not there, ask the question. So I'd say, be okay with not knowing answers, and be okay not knowing what your version of that position looks like. and let it, and just grow with it. And as long as you understand that you're not expected to have all the answers every time, all day long, and that you can go ask questions, and that you okay, here's my advice. Find someone on the coaching team, whether it be assigned by your director or whatever, but find someone to be your go-to, that they can,
your mentor.
Thank you. I cannot remember the word mentor. Get a mentor, because that's really helpful to have one person who you can turn to and say, I don't know how to do this. And if you don't feel comfortable asking in a team chat how to do something, say, hey, mentor, can you ask this question for me? I'm still kind of getting my feet underneath me here to figure out how this works. But having a mentor is so powerful, because knowing you have someone with experience who can be like, yeah, this is not something you need to worry about. You can ask this question on the chat, or I would recommend using, this form with your teachers, or I've had success with this way of approaching a teacher or a principal or whatever. Having a mentor is really powerful. So don't feel like because you got this job that you therefore are that you have to be qualified in that all the answers. Like, that's not, when you got hired on to be this job, it's not because you had all the answers. It's because you have a personality probably that you are eager to learn, and you're open and you're receptive and you communicate well with other people. So take those skills that you got hired for and use them to help you become what you want to be in this job.
I would say, so on the other side of that coin, what I'm worried about and what I was excited about, I was worried about not knowing what my role was, but I was also so excited for the freedom that came with being a coach. Because Laura Lee said, as a teacher, every minute of your day is planned out. And so now I was in this role where I kind of got to choose what my day looked like. And that was scary, but also wonderful. And find those things that bring you joy, like find those things early on that bring you joy, the teachers that bring you joy, and spend time with those things and those people. But that was what was exciting about that job. And there were the little victories, and there were big victories, and there are PDs that fall flat, and there are PDs that go really well. And everybody has those days, and that's okay. And anyway, I think it was, and I'll be honest with you, like what changed my role, we were, I say, lucky enough to be coaches during COVID, during the pandemic. That was my favorite time as a coach, which might sound crazy because people are like, oh my gosh, you must have been so busy. And I was like, yes, I was. And I loved it because I felt so needed. And anyway, it was wonderful. And that's my narcissism coming out. But anyway, I loved that. And so look forward to those opportunities where somebody needs you, because you want to be like, it's initially, I was scared for those moments when people needed me, but then start to embrace those. And okay, how can I help? And what can we do? And okay, let's do this. So two sides of the same coin there.
And on top of that, we all as teachers talk about, we love the light bulb moments, right? When our students have a light bulb come on, it's like what teachers live for. It's like, it like recharges your batteries, and you still get that as a coach. You get to see that with teachers. Like when we dismissed for COVID, I'll just tell this is going to be real quick. I had this teacher who, it was her last year of teaching. She'd been teaching fourth grade for like 30 years. She was retiring that year. And when we dismissed here in Utah was it March, or I think it was March where we dismissed.
March 13th.
Yeah, and went online. I blocked so much of that out.
Friday the 13th. That's what
I got to be honest. I owed her an apology, because in my mind I was like, okay, she's going to go print off like stacks of packets and hand them out to her kids, because she's retiring, and she's never been one to really jump in to use technology. And she's been very vocal about like, this is not how I've always done. I'll do it my way, kind of a thing. And she blew me away. And like, I just love talking about this teacher, because I got a text or email from her saying, I need to talk to you. How do we do this Google video call thing? And I got on, I had a daily appointment set with her for basically all up until mid-May. And this teacher learned how to build a website on Google Sites. She learned how to use Google Classroom. She learned how to deliver assessments with Mastery Connect. She learned how to use all of these tools so that she could be effective. I went and picked up a document camera from the school. She came and got it from my house. I video called and walked her through setting it up at her home. And she was like the spirit of a embodiment of what we want as teachers and what of a lifelong learner here. This teacher had like light bulbs going off all over. And it was like such an honor to be part of that with her, ending her career being like, I'm giving it my all and I'm going to learn so many things. And oh man, it gets me choked up every time I talk about it, because I was I felt bad for one. I was like, I just wrote it off as what she was going to do. But I got to be part of watching her learn all these new skills that is she ever going to do that again? Probably not. She retired in May and she's like proud of herself for how she went out. But as a coach, you get to be part of those moments where teachers push themselves outside of their comfort zone. A lot of our older teachers, technology is so scary for them. And to be like, it can be really understanding where they're coming from and then helping them see how it can bring value to their students and to them. So exciting and so fun.
I love that. That's a cool story. Thank you. Then, as we wrap up here, any recommended resources? Katie already mentioned Google, but any others you may have? Although when I was teaching, that was definitely a good friend. But yeah, anything else you found that's been useful for you as a coach?
I already touched on this earlier, but Jim Knight has a lot of good resources. And it's crazy. Like it seems a little formulaic perhaps at first. But I mean, he has a book that you can buy and then a bunch of resources that are free with it. And as I've used those different forms and the resources, I'm shocked by how incredible like those conversations end up being. And they are research-based, and that doesn't mean they're perfect. And that doesn't mean that it's the perfect fit for everyone. But I've found that when I have used those resources, like it has resulted in some really incredible conversations. So I really do like his stuff. I mentioned earlier the Advice Monster, and that talks about like, kind of like holding back our advice sometimes to better support people. Those are two that I really like myself.
Yeah, and I'll second that. I have a crush on Jim Knight. I will just admit it right here on a recording. But I loved his ideas. I loved his work. It was really, we got to have a pretty small training with him when we first started, and it just really helped us kind of get our boots on the ground. But I also went to the First Lady Abby Cox did a Wow Words Gone conference summit earlier in July, and it was Show Up for Teachers is what it was called. And the Johnson Files, if you're on Instagram at all, the Johnson Files, they're this really fun improv group, but he did a little breakout session and he talked about this idea of in improv, they have the yes and mentality. And I loved this because he said, in improv, you start a story, your buddy who's on stage with you doesn't know where it's going to go, but they have to go with it. So you'll say, oh, hey, do you want to come in my car? And they can't just suddenly say, well, that's not a car, that's a lawnmower. They have to say like, yes, and blah, blah, blah. Like you have to keep building off of each other. And I loved this because so quickly, like the Advice Monster or this idea of like, well, I know better, so I'm going to tell you, like, you said that and that's nice, but no. So instead of a yes, but, which I'm really good at that. I'm really good at that. Yes, I like that, but try the yes and like, yes. Oh, I really love that. And what if what else do you like about that? Or what if we try this? Or building off of something instead of trying to take a left turn. That was really helpful to me. And so I'm going to think about that as I go into the classroom this year with my students. They'll say something and I may quickly want to say, well, that's an awful idea. Okay. I wouldn't ever say it like that, but now I can be like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, let's try, well, what about this? And let's try this. And what else? And anyway, it's just, I loved that idea and how important that is in the coaching role as well. And in relationships, just in general.
I was gonna say this is a good life lesson for me right now too. In other areas, thinking about that. Oh, sorry.
With ed tech, I'm sorry if I'm talking over. I'll be real quick.
No.
Ed tech's resources. There's a lot of, and I wish I could tell you some of them right now, but I can't. A lot of great like social media accounts for ed tech that you can get ideas for tech tips to share with your team and with other teachers. But I think those are great. And sometimes they can be a little too much, and maybe give you the idea that you need to be what they are presenting in on these social media accounts. So just approach those and use them as just a helpful resource, not something that you need to mirror.
And I don't have an actual resource, but something I found really helpful coming back to like, working as an ed tech team together. We had like a spreadsheet where if any of us made a how-to, we all put it in that communal space so that we all were not reinventing the wheel. So like really putting all of the resources we create in one place so we can collaborate. And then on like kind of the other end, anything that we're creating specifically for teachers, like I know you guys do that with your learning in the Lose, having a website of some kind where anything that my teacher might need, I have up on that website. So they could be proactive and go on that website too. I also did a Canvas course since we were doing Canvas. So I was modeling, leading by example. And so I would have like all of my weekly tech tips, videos, everything in one centralized place for teachers to easily access as well.
Awesome. Thank you guys. This has been incredible. I love all of the like very concrete real ideas that can be applied, and then also like the normalizing of feelings and experiences, which I've always found really helpful in a role to hear. Okay, other people are feeling this way or experiencing this. So thank you all so much for your time. Thanks Laura Lee, Jeff, Katie, Vanessa, and we really appreciate this, and we'll get this shared out with some others too, but really grateful for your time. Any, I guess I'm jumping to the end, but any last things that we wanted to add or say?
I have one thing really fast. At the beginning of my time as a coach, a coach who was an instructional coach came to me and was just like, hey, just so you know, sometimes you might feel like it might be harder to see the impact. And because with like students, you are constantly like giving them formal assessments and things like that and whatever. Or it might like students have like, teacher appreciation day and like they like give you all these like flowers and like all these letters and like, Christmas, like all these different things. And we might not have that as coaches, but she recommended to me that I keep a place for all of those things. And so whenever I get like a grateful email or a note or whatever, I'll like take a screenshot of it and I put it in a little Google Doc. And then if I'm ever feeling like maybe I'm not seeing some of the fruits of my labors, I can go look at that document. And that document is like something that I more than not, I just add to it. And then every once in a while I'll scroll through it and be like, wow, that was really cool when that happened or whatever. But that's something that has actually been a useful thing for me. It's kind of weird, but
I love that. I'm going to do that this year.
Yeah.
I love that. I also, now I'm going to add, I know we're done. Just one thing, Patty Norman, who works as an assistant superintendent at the State Board of Education, she takes 15 minutes every day. She sets it into her calendar to show gratitude to one person that day, whether they're in the office in her life. And that is something I'm going to strive to do at my school this year. And what a great way to build relationships, just to thank someone and say, and it doesn't have to be necessarily related to your job, but just, hey, thanks for what you did for me today. Or your student said this wonderful thing about you, and I just wanted to share that with you. Anything like that. I just think what a great way to build yourself into the foundation of that school.
Love that.
I do too. Like, yeah, the one being able to help us have that repository and the other like sharing, kind of helping build a repository for others a little bit as well too, like both of those together. I love those ideas. Thank you guys so much. This has been wonderful. I'll stop sharing my screen here, but yeah, really, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. This was fun.